Elara Vance was hanging suspended against the sheer cliff face of Devil's Canyon. There was no rope around her legs. There was only a rough rope tightened around her left wrist, tethered to the roots of a dried sagebrush jutting out from the cliff. Below her was a bottomless abyss, where sharp, blood-red rocks waited like the teeth of a giant stone monster, patiently awaiting prey to fall. The midday sun in this accursed land was not like sunlight anywhere else. It did not warm. It burned. It was an invisible sledgehammer striking straight down upon her head, turning sweat into grains of salt that rubbed into the gaping wounds on her shoulder and back. The air was thick, tasting of rust and road dust. Every inhalation felt as though her lungs were being scrubbed by sandpaper. Blood had stopped flowing to her left hand long ago. It was numb, turning a bruised purple, swollen like an overripe plum. Every gust of scorching wind from the desert, no matter how slight, caused her body to sway like a broken clock pendulum, and her shoulder joint screamed a groan of agony, as if it were about to be torn from her chest. The pain no longer spiked in waves. It had become a steady rhythm, a part of her existence. She did not dare to move. She did not even dare to breathe heavily, because she knew that the root, the only thing holding her to this world, was dying. The tiny crack, crack sounds that rang out whenever the wind blew hard were cruel reminders of the time remaining. Baron Thorn had not killed her immediately. He was a man who believed in the art of fear. He had stood on the edge of the cliff, adjusting the cuffs of his pristine white silk shirt, and left a message before abandoning her here. When you are ready to talk about the map, scream, or just remain silent and enjoy the slow death. The vultures here prefer to eat the eyes first, Mrs. Vance. But Elara did not scream. She bit her lip until it bled, the metallic taste mixing with the taste of dust in her mouth. She would rather fall into the abyss than sell her soul to the devil. She would rather die than let Thomas's life work fall into the hands of the man who had indirectly killed him. Time passed, and the boundary between life and death blurred. Her eyes began to swim. Mirages began to dance before her eyes. She saw Mia, her little daughter with 2 braided pigtails, running on a field of lush green grass. Grass that had never existed in this arid land. The child's laughter echoed in her ears, drowning out the eerie howling of the wind. "Mommy, Mommy." And then the illusion dissolved as a real sound rang out. Thud, thud. It was not the heavy footsteps of mercenaries. It was the sound of light, cautious footsteps, the sound of worn leather soles grinding against gravel. A solitary sound amidst the wilderness. A long black shadow cast down, blocking the cruel sun that was scorching her face, bringing a brief but strange moment of cool relief. Elara tried to look up through hair matted with sweat and red dust. Her neck was stiff and aching. A man was standing on the edge of the cliff. Red dust covered his faded long coat, making him look like a part of the cliff that had just broken off. A wide-brimmed hat pulled down obscured half his face, and beneath that brim, an old black leather patch covered his left eye. He stood there looking down at her. There was no pity. There was no panic. He looked at her the way a carpenter looks at a table with a broken leg. A problem to be assessed, not a tragedy to be mourned. "It is about to break," Elara whispered, her voice broken, her throat dry as if she had swallowed sand. She did not beg for help. She was too exhausted to hope for the kindness of a stranger in this lawless land. Do not pull me up. Cut it." She wanted him to cut the rope, to let her fall, to end this hell before the root broke on its own and prolonged the fear for a few more seconds. The man paused, his single ash-gray right eye narrowed, scrutinizing her carefully. He slowly drew the dagger at his hip. The blade of Damascus steel gleamed in the harsh sunlight, sharp and cold. He swung his hand up. Elara closed her eyes tight, relaxing her body, waiting for the fall into the void. But there was no fall. Instead, there was a brutal force. A rough hand, strong as iron pliers, grabbed the rope right next to her wrist. And with a low growl rising from his chest, he pulled her up. It was not a gentle pull. He pulled her with pure muscular strength, dragging her away from the jaws of death as one drags trapped livestock. Her entire body was hoisted up, slamming hard against the jagged cliff. Stone chips scraped her knees, tearing the dress that was already tattered, leaving long streaks of blood on her flesh. She let out a gasp of pain, then was thrown heavily onto the hard ground. Elara rolled over, coughing violently, her lungs burning as if she had inhaled fire. She lay there, face pressed against the hot ground, trembling in spasms. She felt the solidity of the earth beneath her body. She was still alive, and the pain rushed in, 1,000 times more intense as blood began to circulate back into her paralyzed arm. The shadow of the man loomed over her. He squatted down, pushed his hat back, revealing a face full of small scars left by sand and gunpowder. "Today is not the day to die, miss," his voice rang out, deep and hoarse, like the wind howling through a ravine. "And I hate to disappoint those vultures. They have been circling for an hour already." He pulled a dented canteen from his coat pocket and tossed it toward her. The canteen landed with a thud right next to her face. "Drink. Do not drink too fast. You will vomit." Elara grabbed the canteen with her sound right hand, fingers trembling as she unscrewed the cap. The warm water, tasting of metal, flowed down her parched throat like a miracle. She drank greedily, water spilling from the corners of her mouth, dripping onto the dust on her collar. Silas watched her, his gaze distant, as if looking through her to see another ghost. He sat down on a nearby rock, pulling out a crumpled pack of cigarettes. He lit one, cupping his hand to block the wind skillfully, then took a deep drag. Blue smoke rose, blending into the cloudless sky.
"Why?" Elara lowered the canteen, panting. Her voice was less hoarse, but still full of suspicion. "Why did you save me? Are you one of Thorne's men?" The man, Silas Kincaid, gave a faint smirk, a smile that did not reach his eyes. He withdrew the dagger and began to scrape the red clay clinging to his boot sole, an action casually terrifying. "If I were Thorne's man, you would be at the bottom of the abyss," Silas said, eyes never leaving the toe of his boot. "He pays for death, not for life." He raised his head, looking straight at Elara with his single eye. "I saved you because of your husband, Thomas Vance." The name made Elara flinch. She shrank back instinctively, her right hand unconsciously searching for a rock to defend herself. "You knew Thomas?" Who are you? Silas exhaled a ring of smoke. 5 years ago, the Northern Ridge, a bad skirmish. I took a bullet through the lung, crawled for 2 days under the scorching sun. Blood drained, throat burning dry, the wound starting to rot. I lay waiting to die right at the boundary fence of your ranch. He paused for a moment, his gaze darkening as he recalled that memory. Your husband found me. He was checking the cattle, a gentle farmer with bright eyes. He could have turned me into the sheriff for $500 reward money, a large sum at that time. Or he could have left me to be bait for the coyotes, but he did not do that. Elara remembered. She remembered one time Thomas returned home with blood-stained clothes, saying he had just helped an injured calf, but his eyes at that time were strange. He had hidden it from her. He always shouldered everything alone. He gave me a cup of water, Silas continued, his voice lowering, almost a whisper, and washed my wound. He did not ask who I was, did not ask what I had done. He only said, no one deserves to die of thirst, not even a stray dog. A cup of water in exchange for a life. Today, I pulled you up. The debt is paid. Silas stood up, dusting off his pants. He sheathed his knife, the movement decisive. Now go. The way to the town of Los Olivos is to the east, about 6 miles. There is an old doctor there who does not ask many questions. Do not come back here again. He turned and walked toward the black horse tied under a withered mesquite tree. His solitary figure blended into the vast wilderness. The name The Ghost was not an empty title. He existed like a wisp of smoke, not wanting to get involved, not wanting to leave a trace. I cannot go back, Elara screamed. The scream tore through the silence of the desert, containing utter despair. Silas paused, hand on the saddle, but did not turn his head. He will kill me if I return without signing the papers. Elara tried to stand up. Her trembling legs gave way, but she clung to a rock to stay upright. The pain from her wrist radiated down her spine, but the pain in her heart was greater. Baron Thorn, he does not just want the land, he will not stop. The name Baron Thorn made Silas's shoulders tense. He slowly turned his head, his single eye narrowing dangerously. Thorn? Silas asked. The mad baron who likes to wear velvet suits in this dusty land? The man who calls himself the god of this barren earth?
He wants the underground aquifer. Elara took a step forward, limping but her eyes burning with determination. My husband, before he died, he found it, the only fresh water source left in this damned valley. He drew a map. Thorn knows that. He wants to monopolize the water source to control the entire valley. Silas sneered, a twisted smile. Water. In this land, water is more precious than blood. It is not strange that he hung you from a tree. My advice, give him that damned map and leave. Move to the south where there is rain and trees. No puddle of water is worth a life. I cannot, Elara yelled, tears beginning to flow, washing away the dust on her cheeks to form long, crooked streaks. I do not keep the map out of greed. I keep it because of Mia. The space around them seemed to freeze. The wind stopped blowing. The cawing of crows died out. There was only the sound of Elara's ragged breathing. Silas walked closer to her. The sound of his boot soles hitting the ground, sounding heavy. He bent down, looking straight into her eyes. This time, the coldness had given way to a cautious curiosity. Who is Mia? My daughter, Elara sobbed, her resilience finally shattering at that name. She is only 5 years old. Her hair is yellow like wheat. Thorn. He has taken her. He holds her at the stone mansion. He said if I did not surrender the map, he would let her thirst just like the land is thirsting. Do you hear it? That tiny cracking sound inside the chest of that scarred man? That was not the sound of a broken bone. That was the sound of the icy shell. Silas Kincaid had painstakingly built around his heart for so many years breaking apart. He knew the stone mansion. Anyone living on this frontier knew that place. It was not a house, it was a fortress built on the highest hill, surrounded by stone walls 3 feet thick, guards patrolling 24/7, and Gatling guns placed on the watchtowers. A 5-year-old child in there was no different from a lamb amidst a pack of hungry wolves. Silas stood up straight. He looked toward the horizon where the sun was slowly setting, dyeing the entire sky red like a sea of blood. He raised his hand to touch his black eye patch, an old habit whenever he had to face terrible decisions. "The stone mansion," Silas muttered, his voice carrying the tone of death. "There are at least 20 professional gunmen. Thorn pays generous wages to the best killers on the frontier, and he feeds the hounds with fresh meat." "You are a hunter," Alara grasped the sleeve of his dusty coat, her eyes pleading. "Thomas said you were the best. You can hit a coin from a distance of 500 yards. You can save her. Please, I will give you the map. I will give you everything I have." Silas looked at the small, scratched hand clinging to his sleeve. He felt her trembling, not from fear, but from hope, and that made him sick. Hope was a poison in this place. He pushed her hand away, not violently, but decisively and coldly. "No," he said, his voice cold as the rock beneath their feet. Alara was stunned, as if she had just been slapped hard. "What?" "I said no." Silas turned his back, walking toward the horse. He pulled the Winchester rifle from its leather sheath, beginning to check the barrel. Away to avoid her gaze. "I have saved you from that abyss, Mrs. Vance. That is what I did to pay the debt to your husband. But I do not save you from this war. I do not save you from Baron Thorn." You are a coward," Alara shouted, despair turning into anger. She rushed forward, pounding on his back with her sound hand. "You would let a child die? Thomas saved you. You owe him." Silas spun around, grabbing her wrist. The killing intent radiating from him was so strong it suffocated Alara. "Coward?" he growled, his face close to hers, letting her see clearly the scars and the devastation in his remaining eye. "Where do you think this came from? Why do you think I live hiding in this rock hole like a lizard? I used to fight, madam. I used to be a soldier. I used to believe in justice, in medals, in protecting the weak." He let go of her hand, pushing her back, and what was the result? I lost an eye, lost my soul, and those I swore to protect. They are all dead. Dead because I believed I was a hero. Thorn is a monster, yes, but he is a monster with money and power. You want to save your daughter? Give the map to him. That is the only way for her to survive. As for me, I am already a ghost, and ghosts do not participate in wars. He mounted the horse, his movements agile and decisive. He looked down at Alara, standing alone in the wilderness, small and pitiful with her tattered dress and swollen arm. "Go to the east," he repeated, his voice monotone and emotionless, as if reading a sentence. "Find a doctor, drink a glass of wine, and forget me." Silas spurred the horse. The beast neighed and galloped toward the dark canyon, the sound of hoofbeats urgent, then fading away, leaving behind the widow and the fading sunset. Alara stood there, dust from Silas's horse covering her, getting into her eyes, into her mouth. She did not cry anymore. The tears had dried up. She watched his figure disappear into the night, then looked down at her aching hand. She clenched her fist, fingernails digging into flesh. "Fine, ghost," she whispered into the void, her voice containing an oath more terrifying than death itself. "You will not help me. I will do it myself. And if I die, I will haunt you until the end of days." Alara turned toward the east, where the safe town Silas had pointed to was. But she did not walk away. She turned back, looking toward the west. There, the stone mansion of Baron Thorn sat arrogantly on the hilltop, windows glowing with the yellow light piercing the night, looking like devilish eyes keeping watch. Mia was there. She started walking, limping, painful, alone. But every step she planted on the dry ground rang out with a stern message. "Mummy is coming here, Mia. Mummy will burn this whole world down to bring you home." And in the distance, on a high rock outcrop hidden from view, a figure on horseback had not yet fully left. Silas Kincaid lowered his binoculars. He watched the small woman walking toward the tiger's den with foolish stubbornness. He swore a vulgar curse, then spat the burning cigarette onto the ground, grinding it with his boot heel until only ash remained. "Crazy woman," he mumbled. Night fell, swallowing both solitary figures into the belly of the vast desert, where the wind began to rise, carrying the scent of sandstorms and blood. Have you ever walked in the absolute darkness of the wasteland? Not the comfortable darkness when you turn off the bedside lamp in your safe room. I am talking about the thick darkness that swallows all sense of direction, where the cold moonlight only reveals the distorted shapes of cacti and boulders, looking like demons waiting to pounce on you. And the cold of the desert at night is not freezing like snow. It is a thin blade, slipping through tattered clothes, cutting to the very bone, making wounds that were hot with infection suddenly become strangely icy. Alara Vance was walking in that darkness. 4 hours had passed since she left Devil's Canyon. Her feet, protected only by leather boots with worn-out soles, were now numb and blistered. Her left wrist, which had once borne the weight of her entire body, was swollen, throbbing with every heartbeat, as if a small beast were gnawing inside the bruised flesh. Every step was a battle between will and body. She did not feel hunger. She did not feel thirst. Her body was running on a single type of fuel, rage and love, a fierce, a desperate love of a mother robbed of her child. "Mummy is coming, Mia," she mumbled, her cracked lips forming meaningless sounds into the void, trying to drive away the whistling wind in her ears. "Mummy is almost there." But will is one thing, and the body is another. Alara tripped over a sagebrush root growing underground. She fell face down, her face slammed hard against the cold ground full of sharp gravel. The metallic taste of earth and blood welled up in her mouth again. She tried to push herself up, but her arms trembled violently, refusing to obey. She lay there, cheek pressed against the earth, looking at the distant and indifferent stars above. Perhaps Silas was right. A weak voice rang in her head, sounding exactly like the voice of that one-eyed man. "You will die before you get there. You are an ant trying to kick down a stone wall." Right at that moment, the sound rang out. Clop, clop, clop. The sound of horse hooves. Slow, steady. Not the hurried hooves of a pursuer, but the leisurely rhythm of a traveler in no rush, or someone taking a stroll in their own yard. Alara held her breath, lying perfectly still, hands groping in the dark to find a sharp rock. She pressed her body close to the ground, hoping the darkness would conceal her, but that looming black shadow stopped right beside her. A smell of cheap tobacco blended with the scent of gun oil and horse sweat wafted into the air, overpowering the smell of sagebrush. "You have walked 5 miles," the familiar hoarse voice rang out from above, with that swollen ankle and that wrist about to turn gangrenous. "I must admit, Mrs. Vance, you are tougher than you look. Or you are stupider than I thought." Elara looked up. Silas Kincaid was sitting on the back of his black horse, the Winchester still resting across his thighs, the barrel pointing toward the sky. He looked down at her with his single eye shining in the night, reflecting the cold moonlight. "Did you come back to mock me?" Elara hissed, trying to push herself into a sitting position, retaining the last bit of her dignity. "Or did you come to see if the vultures had started their feast?" Silas did not answer. He took a long drag on his cigarette, the red ember lighting up the long scar running down his left cheek, then exhaled a cloud of milky white smoke into the night. "I came back," he said slowly, his tone indifferent as if talking about the weather, "because this damned horse refused to go toward the east. It kept demanding to go toward the west, and I hate arguing with animals." It was a clumsy lie, a lie that both of them knew. Silas had traveled 3 miles toward the town, but with every step away from this crazy woman, he heard the screams of his comrades from years ago, the young soldiers who had died because he ran away. The ghosts in his head screamed, demanding he turn back. The conscience of a sinner is sometimes heavier than chains. He could not let another name be carved onto the tombstone in his mind. He removed his foot from the stirrup, extending a calloused hand downward. "Climb up, before I change my mind and let you become dinner for the wolves." Elara looked at that hand. She looked into Silas's eye. She did not see warmth, but she saw a commitment, a compromise between 2 desperate people. She grabbed his hand. Silas pulled her up to sit behind him as easily as lifting a child. "Do not hold on too tight," he grumbled, as her arms tightened around his waist to keep balance. "And do not think I am a knight. I am just going the same way." They rode in silence for another hour. Silas did not gallop. He guided the horse along hidden trails, concealed under the shadows of large boulders, staying far away from the main road where Thorne's patrols might appear. The air suddenly became heavier. The wind changed direction, carrying a strange scent. "Do you smell that?" Elara whispered, her voice tense. Silas sniffed. The smell of burnt wood, and the smell of copper. "The smell of copper?" "Blood," Silas replied curtly, his hand tightening on the reins. "Dried blood." He slowed the horse. In front of them, in a depression of the valley, a plume of thick black smoke was still rising, obscuring part of the moonlight. It was Old Miller's Way Station, a place that used to be a water supply point for travelers, but had been abandoned for 2 years. "There is firelight," Elara pointed. "It is not a campfire, it is embers. Someone has burned this place down," Silas whispered, his voice hardening. He dismounted, tying the reins to a low bush. "Stay here," he ordered, drawing the Colt Navy revolver at his hip, his thumb gently cocking the hammer. "No," Elara slid down after him, her legs aching as they touched the ground, but she gritted her teeth and endured it. "If Mia is there, I must see." Silas gave her a sharp glare with his single eye, but he did not have time to argue. He nodded, signaling for her to stay close behind him and keep low. They approached the ruins of the way station like two ghosts. The scene before them was a picture of hell on earth. The wooden house had been completely incinerated, leaving only charred skeletal frames reaching up to the sky like the ribs of a giant dead monster. The roof had collapsed, glowing coals still smoldering beneath the thick layer of ash, making eerie popping sounds. But the most terrible thing was not the house. It was the overturned carriage in the front yard. An armored black stagecoach, the kind used to transport valuable goods for the bank or the post office, was now crushed, its wheels shattered. And around it were the bodies. 3 men wearing dark blue guard uniforms. They lay scattered on the ground, their postures twisted. Silas walked over to a body lying face down. He used the toe of his boot to flip the corpse over. A middle-aged man, his chest torn apart by bullets, eyes still staring wide open at the sky. "Not highwaymen," Silas muttered, his eyes scanning the scene quickly, reading signs that ordinary people would not see. Highwaymen would take boots, guns, and ammunition. These men still have everything intact. The gun is still in the holster. They were killed by surprise. A purge. He walked over to the carriage. The rear door of the vehicle had been blown open with explosives. Inside, it was empty. They took something, Silas concluded, something so important that they had to kill all witnesses and burn down the entire way station to destroy the evidence. While Silas checked the bodies, Alara rushed toward the rubble of the house. Her heart pounded in her chest. She was terrified of what she might find, but she was even more terrified of finding nothing. "Mia!" she called softly, voice trembling, trying to suppress a sob. "Mia!" She dug through the burnt wooden beams, soot covering her hands and face, mixing with sweat to form black streaks. There was no one. There was no answer. There was only the sound of wind whistling through the gaping window frames like mocking laughter. "She is not here, Alara," Silas said from behind, his voice calm but containing a warning. He was examining the wheel tracks on the ground. "Look at this. There is another vehicle, wider wheels, heavier, that left after the attack, heading toward the west, toward the stone mansion." Alara knelt amidst the ashes. Disappointment weighed on her shoulders like a 1,000-pound rock. She lowered her head, tears threatening to spill over. She had arrived too late, and then her gaze touched something stuck under a scorched beam, right next to a large rock. A streak of pale pink, dirty, but contrasting sharply with the black color of the surrounding ash. She reached out and pulled it free. Her hands trembled violently. It was a rag doll. It was tattered, stained with mud, and smelling of smoke. One eye, made of a large button, had been torn off, leaving only a dangling thread. The golden yarn hair was now grey with ash. "Mr. Button," Alara sobbed, hugging the doll tight to her chest, inhaling the lingering familiar scent of her daughter hidden beneath the acrid smell of smoke. "This belongs to Mia. She never leaves it behind. She was here. She is alive." Silas walked closer. He did not look at the doll with pity. He looked at it with the eye of a veteran scout, always suspicious of everything. He frowned. "Why is it so heavy?" "What?" Alara looked up, her red eyes staring at him in confusion. The doll. Silas pointed at the tattered, stuffed animal in her hand. The way you are holding it, its arm is sagging. It is heavier than normal stuffing. Give it here. Alara hesitated for a second, then handed the doll to him. Silas took it. He squeezed the torso of the doll. There was a strange rustling sound coming from inside. It is torn at the stomach here, Silas murmured. The tear looked as if someone had hurriedly ripped it open and stuffed something inside, then used a safety pin to fasten it temporarily. He removed the rusty safety pin. He inserted 2 rough fingers inside the stuffing. He touched a hard, cylindrical object. He slowly pulled it out. It was not cotton. It was a leather tube, the kind used to hold blueprints or important documents, rolled up and tied tightly with a leather strap. Silas snatched the leather tube. He drew his dagger, cutting the strap. He spread the papers inside out on the still hot hood of the overturned carriage under the dim moonlight and the faint light of the hurricane lantern he had just lit. Alara leaned in close. Neatly typed lines of text appeared. Geological maps, numbers calculating gradients, and most importantly, handwritten letters on premium paper embossed with an eagle emblem. "What is this?" Alara asked, confusion clearly visible on her face. Silas did not answer immediately. His single eye scanned the lines of text quickly, and his expression shifted from curiosity to horror. He recognized these symbols. He had seen them in the days when he was a mercenary protecting tycoons. "Mother of God," he swore, a hiss through his teeth, full of bitterness. "We were wrong, Alara. We were completely wrong, and this entire valley is full of fools." "Wrong about what? Does Thorn not want water?" Silas pointed a calloused finger at a complex technical drawing. Straight lines ran through the valley, cutting across Alara's ranch, piercing through the rocky hills and ending at a large marker right over the aquifer her husband had found. "Thorn does not want water to sell to farmers or to irrigate the damned corn," Silas said, his voice shaking with a suppressed rage. "He wants water for boilers, for steam locomotives." "Locomotives?" "The Union Pacific Railroad." Silas tapped hard on the paper, making a dry sound. "He is secretly building a railway line through this valley. It will connect the huge silver mine, newly found in the north, with the seaport in the south. If this line is built, the land value here will increase 1,000 times. This will be the main transit station." He flipped to the next paper, a letter with a bright red wax seal, the seal of the state eagle. "But he needs clean land. He needs to drive all the people away before the government announces the project so he can buy the land at a cheap price. And he needs water to operate the refueling station for the trains. That is why he wants to kill you. Not because you're stubborn, but because you're sitting on a gold mine that you are unaware of. And this," Silas pointed at the flamboyant, arrogant signature at the bottom of the letter. "This is the reason he can do everything. Kill people, burn houses, kidnap, without fearing the sheriff will investigate." "Whose signature is it?" Alara squinted at the curling strokes. "The state governor." Silas looked up at Alara, his eye burning, a fire that Alara had never seen before. "This letter confirms a bribe of $50,000 from Thorn, so the governor will ignore the accidents of the people in the valley. And he ordered Thorn to clear the tracks within a month." Alara was stunned. She looked at the tattered doll in her hand, then looked at the stack of papers. She shuddered as she realized the weight of the thing she was holding. Mia, why did Mia have this? Have, perhaps, this mailman? Silas jerked his shin toward the corpse of the middle-aged man, realized he was ambushed. In his final moments, when he saw Thorne's soldiers dragging the girl past him, he secretly stuffed this tube into her doll. A final gamble. He hoped the assassins would not search the toys of a child. Silas rolled the papers up, carefully tucking them into the inner pocket of his coat, right next to his heart, then buttoned his coat tightly. He looked at Alara, and this time the disdain had disappeared completely. Instead, there was the respect of a soldier for a comrade on the battlefield. "Listen, Alara," Silas said, his voice deep and serious as never before. He placed both hands on her shoulders, squeezing gently. "Now, you do not just hold the water map. You are holding a bomb that can blow up both the governor's political career and Baron Thorne's head. If Thorne knows we have this, he will send an entire army to hunt us down." "Will it save Mia?" Alara asked, her eyes sharp as daggers. She did not care about politics. She only cared about her daughter. "If we use it the right way," Silas nodded, a dangerous smile appearing on his lips. He patted the rifle on the horse's back lightly. "But Thorne has many guns," Alara worried. Silas shook his head. He looked toward the stone mansion in the distance, where the lights were still blazing. "Villains like Thorne may not fear my guns, Alara. He can hire more soldiers, buy more guns, build higher walls. But men like him," Silas paused, his gaze becoming deep and terrifying. "They fear these papers with signatures more than death, because this thing can strip away the only thing he cares about, power. Guns only kill his body, but this paper will kill his reputation, his assets, and his megalomaniacal ego." Alara stood up, dusting off her dress. She looked at the doll in her hand, squeezing it tight. She felt a new strength rising within her. She was no longer prey. She was a hunter. "Then we will use it," she said, her voice steely. "We will use it to strangle him, just as he did to me," Silas smirked. A real smile, though twisted and cruel. The ghost inside him seemed to be smiling along. He had found a reason to fight, not for money, not for redemption, but because he wanted to see the look on Baron Thorne's face when the ghost returned from the dead, carrying a death sentence in his hand. "Mount up, ma'am," Silas said, his voice gentler but full of determination. "We have a party to crash, and I think Thorne will not like the gift we are bringing." The desert night suddenly became less cold, because the fire of vengeance had just been lit, burning brighter and hotter than any campfire. Alara climbed onto the horse, holding tight to Silas's waist. This time, she was no longer trembling. Two figures blended into the night, galloping toward the monster's lair, carrying the most dangerous weapon in the world, the truth.